So to make the neck dynamic, so when the object moves, it will react to those transformations, we're going to use two tools here. So under skeleton, we'll use the IK spline handle tool, which relies on a curve to control the rotation of the joints. And for that curve, we're going to make a dynamic hair. And so that can be found under FX and hair. And the particular command that we want is make selected curves dynamic. So just so you can see, once we go back into rigging, go to skeleton, create IK spline handle tool, one of the options is to auto create a curve. Now we could do that and it will create a curve for us, but I find it's better to draw our own curve for this and turn that off. So we'll come back to that in a second. So the first thing to do is to create a curve, and again we want to do this in our orthographic view. So we'll go to Create, Curve Tools, CV Curve, and again I'm going to snap to the grid points holding X. Hitting return, and I'll name this neck curve. Now one of the things about this process is it gets a little tricky to select things, and you'll see what I mean in a second. And there are a lot of different settings that we have to change in sort of hidden locations. Not hidden, but there are just a bunch of new nodes that are created, so it's hard to keep track of. So the first thing we want to do is delete the history and freeze transformations on this curve. And now we'll go into our FX menu and hair, make selected curves dynamic. And we just want to output a NURBS curve. We don't want any paint effects or anything like that. And we can turn that off. Yeah, I think that's good. So we make curves dynamic. Now you'll see a whole bunch of new stuff is added to our outliner here. So let's just take a quick look. So there's a hair system, which controls the quality of the hair that's connected and been created here. There's a nucleus node, which sets the environmental conditions, so things like gravity, wind, that sort of thing. And then we've got hair system follicles. So follicles, they're hard to see, and I don't think we will be able to see it easily here. Let me see if I can just hide everything else. Okay, it's not showing us the follicle. But there is a follicle, oops. Here it is. So here it is at the root, at the origin. And this is what sort of the hair is bound to. And then we've got the hair system output curves. And these are the dynamic curves, or in this case, the single dynamic curve. So the dynamic curve is the one that we want to control our rig here. So you can see we have our original curve now that is attached to a follicle, but this one, curve 1, is our dynamic one. So I'm going to name this neck dyna curve, just so it's easier to recognize. And now we'll go on to the next stage of using it in our IK spline rig. So one thing we want to change here is in the follicle node, follicle shape, is that the start direction, the point lock. So the point lock means that this curve is locked both at its base down here and its tip up here. And we want it to be locked only at the base. So we have to change point lock to base. And just so we can see what's going on, I'm going to go into the hair system shape and go to turbulence and give some turbulence to this. And you'll see what happens in a sec. I'm going to give myself some more frames. And I'm going to make sure that in my timeline I'll right click. Playback speed is set to play every frame max real time. So now when I play the animation, we can see there's that dynamic curve. If we select it, we can see that is the dynamic curve. And so it's useful to turn on turbulence now and let it play out, because now this curve is separate from everything else. It's just easier to select. So now to go to our rigging menus, skeleton, create IK spline handle, open the options, and the thing we have to make sure is auto create curve is turned off. I think we can leave everything else. And it gives us some tips down in the bottom here. So we have to select the start joint, and in this case we don't want to select the root, we want to select the first neck joint here, and then it tells us to select the end joint, and that's this one up here, and now it says to select the curve, and it's this one here, and now you can see it's following that curve. And if we play the animation now, we can see that the joint system is now being controlled by that curve, and turbulence is on quite high, so it's going a little crazy. And so that is controlled in the hair system shape. So we can turn down the intensity and the speed and the frequency a bit. And now you can see it's moving around a little or a lot. I also have gravity still turned on, right? So if we go into the nucleus node and go down here to gravity, we can set that to 0. And now it's just responding to the turbulence and not to gravity. Right? Okay, so that's how we set up that control, or that dynamic system. What we'll do next in the next video is integrate it into the joint system, and this is where things can get a little bit tricky. So we'll see that when we return.